When we build a custom subwoofer enclosure, we don't want to just leave it as bare wood. We want to apply a finish. Now, this could be upholstery carpet as we've done in the past on other enclosure builds here on the channel, or it could be some sort of paint coating. In this video, we're going to be applying a special coating made specifically for speaker enclosures. We're also going to be doing some upholstery work to wrap up these beauty panel pieces. I'm Mark, welcome to CarAudioFabrication, the channel where together we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. Let's get started. So whenever we're doing a paint coating and upholstery work on custom subwoofer enclosures, the one thing is for sure, our preparation is key. So there's a couple things we've done between the last video and this one. First off, I've taken the time to fill all of the brad nail holes with a special plastic wood filler. This is easy to apply, it dries quickly, and then I just quickly sand it down. That's because we're going to be using a special speaker cabinet coating in order to coat this whole enclosure on the outside. So we want to make sure that everything is good and smooth. So I've also made sure that I've sanded all of the end panels flush with these pieces. And to give the enclosure much more of a finished look, I've used a round over bit on the router to round over all of the corners. In this case, we went with this guy here. This is a 1/4 inch round over bit. Speaking of round over bits, I of course wanted the outside of the port here rounded, but what I did intentionally is I raised the router bit a little bit more outside of the table. That way it created this lip, and you guys will see what that's for in a second. Now you see there's some black spray paint applied already. Obviously, I did that inside the port to give the port a nice dark look, but I did that flat black paint on the rest of the subwoofer face here just to make sure that I have paint coverage down deep into these grooves, and this coating is a bit more expensive, so I don't want to waste it on this large area here. So instead I just painted that the flat black paint because that's going to be hidden behind our beauty panels. Now you'll notice I also painted the beauty panels. In particular, I painted the back side just to give the back side of these a much more finished look, even though these are going to be wrapped with upholstery materials. Now I also added some pre-drill holes for our mounting hardware for the subwoofer. I did this by first positioning the W7 in place and then using these are transfer punches. I use these to carefully transfer the exact center of each mounting hole. That allows me to then pull the subwoofer out of the enclosure, and then I can carefully use this small drill bit to pre-drill each of the holes. When it comes to mounting this beast of a subwoofer, that's going to make things significantly more easy. I'll be able to just put the subwoofer on the flange and then send these babies home. Finally, on the back side of the enclosure, I made a hole for our speaker terminal. You could do this with a hole saw, but in my case, I just like to use this circle template along with a flush trim bit and a router. So let's get set up to start applying our Duratex. Now, I made a full video about this if you guys want to learn more. I also have a link for this down in the video description, but this is a coating made specifically for coating speaker enclosures. Usually I like to work up on the table, but due to the size of this enclosure, I'm thinking it's definitely going to be easier to work on the floor. So I've protected my floor here, that way we don't have any coating get on it. And I've also put down these little painter's triangles. These are for the enclosure to sit on top of. Just like this will allow me to coat 5 of the sides, and then I can do the back side once obviously the front here has dried. But you can see by having those painter's triangles down there, I can work that material around that edge in this first application. Now remember earlier I mentioned how I intentionally had the round over bit go deeper into the material to create this groove, and that's so that we can precisely cut a line and protect this with painter's tape. So I apply that tape, tuck it down into the corner, and I'm using my Olfa blade to carefully cut out that exact shape. I can then remove the excess material, and another technique that you can use here to do something similar is you could just use a template in order to cut whatever shape you want. So to apply our Duratex, we're going to be using some standard painting items like a painter's tray and a roller, but what's really important is to have the right roller type. This is a special foam that will give us that textured coating. Again, these are linked down in the video description for you guys. I also have a brush which will help me work it down into some of the corners of the enclosure. And then you just want to have things like some protective gloves and a respirator. I've got mine. Let's go. Now really quick, while that coating is drying, I want to take a quick second to show you guys this new speaker wire. This is the Cord Ultraflex speaker wire from KnuKonceptz. As you can imagine, it's named the Ultraflex cable because it's extremely flexible, which makes it great for a car audio application or a home audio application. You can easily run this wire. As of right now, it comes in 4 different sizes. You've got the 16 gauge, 14 gauge, 12 gauge, and the 10 gauge. And that's what we're going to be using for our subwoofer here. We've got a beastly subwoofer, so we need some large format speaker wire going with that 10 gauge cable. Of course, the wire we're using here is pure oxygen-free copper, and if you guys are using it in a home audio application, or if you have banana connectors in your build, KnuKonceptz now has these as well. These hold up to 8 gauge speaker wire. A big thanks to KnuKonceptz for sponsoring this video. If you guys want to learn more, check out the links down in the video description. All right, guys, check it out. The enclosure is looking super cool so far. I really love this Duratex coating. It's very easy to apply, and it gives a very nice, appealing look. Now, the biggest tip there is definitely make sure that you still peel off that protective tape while that material is still wet. I've been letting this dry for a while now, but it really starts to give a very hard finish, and it kind of will be chipping away if you're trying to pull up the tape too late, so make sure you do it while it's still wet. Now, while that continues to cure, I'm going to turn my attention to doing some of the upholstery. We've got our DAP Weldwood Lando Top and Trim Adhesive. Again, this is the best adhesive that you want to use for vinyl upholstery. I'll put a link for you guys down in the video description. I need to prime my sprayer here in a second, but we're going to start with applying it onto our pieces here, and you can see I've got my table work surface all protected and ready to go. And this is a contact adhesive, so we need to spray it to both our workpiece and our upholstery material. So let's get to work. So you can see I've got some wiring going into the enclosure here. Again, we're using that KnuKonceptz cord speaker cable, the 10 gauge. I've got it wired back to my terminal there. And the reason I've added this split here is because our subwoofer is a dual voice coil subwoofer. So I want to run to each coil, and then I'm going to jumper the two coils together because I'm running the coils in series. Each coil is 1.5 ohms, so by jumpering them together, we're going to be creating a 3 ohm load at the amplifier. Now, a couple of things I need to do here to prepare this speaker wire. First of all, I want to add a piece of heat shrink that is large enough to hold both of these wires in this location right here. That's going to prevent this split from traveling any further up the wire. I'm also going to be using some Sound Shield Wrap It. This is just a closed cell foam with an adhesive layer. I'm going to wrap that around the speaker wire here in its exposed area, and the reason for that is we don't want this wire bouncing on the inside of the enclosure making noise while the subwoofer is moving, so by adding that foam we can avoid that. And just for good measure, I've used one of these cable clamps here on the inside of the enclosure to hold the speaker wire predictably in position. So now I'm going to position the subwoofer next to its mounting hole, and you can see I've got a blanket on top of the enclosure there, of course, to protect it, and I'm going to add the wires into each of the terminals, making sure again that we properly wire this in series to present that 3 ohm load. I'll then carefully lower the subwoofer into position, making sure that I line up with the holes that I pre-drilled earlier. Once the subwoofer is in position, I'm going to apply a few of the screws, and usually I just put it enough to hold the subwoofer in place, and then I'll do one more last resistance test using the multimeter just to verify that the wiring is wired like I predicted. After that, I can send the rest of the screws home. Now, since this is a W7, I have a few more steps to do to mount this subwoofer, and a quick side note, I made a full video for JL Audio over on their channel that covers this process in detail. All right, guys, check it out. Here it is, the finished enclosure. And just in case you were wondering, yes, I did pop these panels off temporarily, just because when I was going to be wiring the subwoofer, I knew I was going to have to kind of position it on this face, and I didn't want to take the chance of this beast of a subwoofer with all of its weight somehow leaving a mark on this vinyl, so that's why I took those off, but now those are popped back in position and held in place. In my opinion, this enclosure turned out amazing. I'm super happy with the way it looks, but I want to hear from you guys too. What do you guys think so far of the build process? Now, of course, the next step is we have to get this enclosure installed. To catch that next video along with other car audio lessons and tutorials in the future, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to tune in and watch. Next time you need speaker wire for a build, definitely check out our show sponsor, KnuKonceptz, with their new cord speaker wire. Learn more down below. A special thanks to them along with Jerry, William, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible, and thank you guys for tuning in and watching.